I thought I had found the perfect job until I discovered the clipboard in the glove compartment with 7 rules written in faded red ink. And beneath them, a handwritten note that simply read, "The last patrol officer lasted 3 weeks. My name is Nathan, and I am 27 years old. 6 months ago, I was hired as a wilderness patrol officer for the remote mountain regions of Yuba County, California. The pay was exceptional for what seemed like simple work: drive the logging roads at night, check for illegal campers, report any unusual activity, and make sure the trails stayed clear. I had just finished my degree in environmental science and was drowning in student debt. So when the county office called me in for an interview, I did not hesitate. The interview itself should have been my first warning. It took place in a small administrative building on the outskirts of a town called Brownsville, tucked so deep into the Sierra Nevada foothills that my GPS lost signal twice on the way there. The woman who interviewed me, a stern-looking county supervisor named Mrs. Calloway, spent less time asking about my qualifications and more time studying my face, as if searching for something specific. She asked me strange questions. Had I ever experienced anything I could not explain? Was I comfortable being alone for long periods? Did I believe in things that could not be seen? I answered honestly, though I thought the questions were odd. I told her I was rational, level-headed, and did not scare easily. She seemed satisfied with that. Before I left, she slid a thick envelope across the desk and told me to read everything inside before my first shift. She also said something I will never forget. Some places hold memories, Nathan. The mountains remember everything. If you are enjoying this story so far, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue bringing you these unsettling true experiences. And please, drop a comment below telling me if you have ever experienced something in the wilderness that you could not explain. I read every single one that I started the job on a cold Monday night in late October. The county provided me with a white Ford Ranger with a light bar on top and a radio that crackled with static more often than voices. My patrol route covered nearly 60 miles of winding dirt roads, fire trails, and forgotten logging paths that snaked through dense pine forests and granite ridges. The area was vast, isolated, and eerily quiet. My shift began at 8 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. I drove slowly along the main forest road, my headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating walls of towering pines on either side. Occasionally, I would see the glowing eyes of deer or raccoons reflecting in the beams. But otherwise, the mountains felt empty. It was around 11 p.m. when I remembered the envelope Mrs. Calloway had given me. I had tossed it onto the passenger seat and forgotten about it in the rush of starting the new job. I pulled over near a widening in the road, kept the engine running, and tore open the envelope. Inside was a laminated map of my patrol area, a basic instruction manual, and a single sheet of paper clipped to a small, weathered clipboard. The clipboard looked old, as if it had been passed down through many hands. The paper was slightly yellowed, and the text was typed in an old typewriter font, though someone had gone over it with red ink to make it stand out. At the top, in bold letters. It read: asterisk patrol rules follow without exing, and beneath that were 7 rules. 1. Never leave your vehicle after midnight unless absolutely necessary. Point 2. If you hear footsteps matching your own pace, stop moving immediately and count to 30.3. Do not look directly at any lights that appear between the trees after dark. Point 4. If you find personal belongings on the trail that were not there before, do not touch them. Point 5. Always carry a compass. If it starts spinning wildly, turn back the way you came. Point 6. If you encounter fog that appears suddenly and feels unnaturally cold, do not drive through it. Wait until it clears on its own. Point 7. If you see 5 figures standing together in the distance, leave the area immediately and report your location. I stared at the list for a long time, my hands gripping the clipboard tighter than I intended. The rules were bizarre. They read less like safety guidelines and more like warnings against something supernatural. I almost laughed, assuming it was some kind of hazing ritual for new hires. But then I saw the handwritten note at the bottom, scrawled in blue pen with shaky handwriting. The last patrol officer lasted 3 weeks. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced out the windshield into the darkness. The trees stood perfectly still. No wind, no sound, just an oppressive silence that seemed to press against the truck from all sides. I picked up the radio and pressed the call button. Base, this is Patrol 1. Do you copy? Static. I tried again. Base, this is Nathan on Patrol 1. I have a question about the patrol rules. Can someone respond? More static, and then finally, a tired voice crackled through. Patrol 1, this is Base. Go ahead. Yeah, I just found a list of rules in the truck. Are these official? There was a long pause. Too long. Follow the rules, Nathan. They are there for a reason. But what do they mean? What am I supposed to be watching for? Another pause. The static seemed louder this time, almost like whispering beneath the noise. Just follow the rules. Check in every 2 hours. Stay safe. The line went dead. I sat there in the truck, staring at the clipboard. My logical mind wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, but something deeper, something instinctual, told me to take it seriously. I clipped the board to the sun visor where I could see it easily and continued my patrol. The first few nights were uneventful. I drove my route, checked the trail markers, and noted a few minor things in my log. A fallen tree blocking a side road, some tire tracks near an old campsite, a broken fence at the edge of the national forest boundary. I saw no other people, no campers, no hikers, just endless trees and darkness. But I started noticing small things that made me uneasy. On the third night, I found a single hiking boot sitting upright in the middle of the road. It was clean, almost new, with the laces still tied. I stopped the truck and stared at it through the windshield. Rule 4 echoed in my mind. If you find personal belongings on the trail that were not there before, do not touch them. I drove around it. On the fifth night, I heard footsteps outside the truck while I was parked near an old fire lookout tower. I had gotten out to stretch my legs, and as I walked toward the tower, I heard the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel behind me. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I took a step forward. The footsteps matched me exactly. My heart hammered in my chest. I remembered Rule 2. I stopped moving and began counting. Point 1, 2, 3. The footsteps continued for a moment, then stopped. 10, 15, 20. Silence. Point 30. I did not turn around. I walked quickly back to the truck, got inside, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring into the rearview mirror, but I saw nothing. Just darkness. I did not leave the truck for the rest of that shift. On the 8th night, I saw the lights. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was driving along a narrow ridge road with a steep drop-off on one side and thick forest on the other. Through the trees to my left, I saw a soft, pale light glowing between the trunks. It was faint at first, like a distant campfire, but as I drove, it seemed to move parallel to me. Keeping pace with the truck, I remembered Rule 3. Do not look directly at any lights that appear between the trees after dark. I kept my eyes on the road. But in my peripheral vision, I could see the light growing brighter. It pulsed gently, almost like it was breathing. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and I resisted the urge to turn my head and look. The light followed me for nearly 2 miles before it finally faded. Away into the darkness. I reported it to base. The dispatcher, a different voice this time, simply said, "Noted. Continue your patrol." That was it. No explanation. No concern. By the end of the second week, I was seriously considering quitting. The isolation was getting to me, and the rules no longer felt like a joke. They felt like a lifeline. But then I found the folder. It was a Friday night, and I had returned to the small ranger station at the end of my shift to refuel the truck and file my nightly report. The station was little more than a glorified shed with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a coffee maker that looked older than me. As I was filling out my logbook, I noticed a filing cabinet drawer that was slightly open. Curious. I pulled it fully open and found a thick manila folder labeled Yuba County Incident Reports, 1978. Asterisk. I hesitated, then pulled it out and opened it. Inside were dozens of reports, witness statements, and newspaper clippings, all related to a single event. The papers were old, some of them torn or stained, but the story they told was chilling. In February of 1978, 5 men from the Yuba County area drove up into these same mountains to attend a basketball game. They were all friends, all in their 20s and 30s, and all described as mentally disabled or developmentally delayed. Their names were listed: Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Ted Weiher. After the game, they were supposed to drive home. They never made it. Their car was found days later, abandoned on a remote mountain road miles from where they should have been. The car was in perfect condition, but it was stuck in snow, and the keys were missing. None of the men were inside. A massive search was launched. 4 of the men were eventually found dead, scattered across the mountains over the following months. Their bodies were discovered in bizarre locations, some near trailers, some in the wilderness, some partially consumed by animals. One man, Ted Wayher, was found inside a remote Forest Service trailer, dead from starvation and exposure, despite the trailer being stocked with food and supplies. Gary Mathias was never found. The case was never solved. Investigators could not explain why the men left the main road, why they abandoned the car, or how they ended up so deep in the mountains. The incident became known as the Yuba County Five and remained one of the most baffling disappearances in California history. I read through the reports, my hands trembling. There were witness statements from search parties, descriptions of strange findings, and notes that made my blood run cold. One report, written by a Forest Service worker, described finding arrangements of rocks in unnatural patterns near where one of the bodies was discovered. Another mentioned footprints that appeared and disappeared without explanation, but it was the final page that stopped me cold. It was a handwritten note, clipped to the back of the folder, dated just 3 years ago. It read, "Patrol officers continue to report unusual activity in the area where the 5 men disappeared. Lights in the trees, missing personal items. Voices. Command has decided to implement the 7-rule protocol to minimize risk. All new hires must be briefed, but the full story is not to be disclosed unless necessary. We cannot afford to lose more people to these mountains." I closed the folder and sat back in the chair, my mind racing. The rules were not a joke. They were a survival guide, and whatever had happened to those 5 men in 1978 was still happening now. I should have quit right then. I should have walked out of that station, driven home, and never come back. But I did not, because deep down, I needed to know what was really out there in those mountains, and I was about to find out. The next week changed everything. I could not stop thinking about the Yuba County Five. During my days off, I researched the case obsessively, reading every article and forum post I could find. The more I learned, the more disturbed I became. Witnesses reported strange behavior from the men before they disappeared. They seemed confused, disoriented, as if something had drawn them off course. Some investigators believed they had been chased. Others thought they had become lost in a sudden snowstorm. But none of the explanations made sense. Why would 5 grown men abandon a perfectly functional car and walk miles into freezing wilderness? Why would Ted Wayher stay in that trailer and starve when there was food all around him? And where was Gary Mathias? I started my 3rd week of patrols with a new sense of dread. The rules were no longer just guidelines, they were warnings from people who knew something terrible lived in these mountains. And I was determined to figure out what it was. Monday night began like any other. I arrived at the ranger station at 7:45 p.m., performed my vehicle check, and reviewed my route. The air was colder now, sharp enough to sting my lungs when I breathed. Winter was coming early to the mountains. At exactly 8 p.m., I started my patrol. The first few hours passed without incident. I drove slowly through the network of forest roads, my headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. The radio crackled occasionally with check-ins from base, but otherwise, the night was silent. It was at 11:30 p.m. when I noticed the compass. I had started carrying one after reading Rule 5, keeping it clipped to the dashboard where I could see it easily. For 2 weeks, it had functioned normally, the needle always pointing steadily north. But as I rounded a curve near an area marked on my map as Cascade Creek, the needle began to twitch. At first, it was subtle, just a slight tremor. But within seconds, it started spinning wildly, rotating in full circles as if magnetism itself had gone insane. My stomach dropped. I immediately stopped the truck and threw it into reverse, backing up the way I had come. As soon as I moved 50 feet away from the curve, the compass needle settled, pointing north again. I sat there, staring at the spinning light bar reflection on the trees ahead. Rule 5 was clear. Always carry a compass. If it starts spinning wildly, turn back the way you came. I turned the truck around and took an alternate route. But the incident rattled me. Something at Cascade Creek had interfered with the compass, something powerful enough to disrupt magnetic fields. I reported it to base, and the dispatcher simply acknowledged it with a tired, "Copy that, Patrol 1." No surprise. No concern. Just acceptance. These people knew exactly what was happening out here. Tuesday night, I encountered the fog. It was just after 1 a.m., and I was driving along a high ridge road that overlooked a deep canyon. The night was clear, the stars bright overhead, when suddenly a wall of fog appeared directly in front of me. It was not natural fog. It rose from nowhere, thick and white, stretching across the entire road like a curtain. I slowed the truck to a crawl and felt the temperature inside the cab plummet. My breath came out in visible clouds, and frost began forming on the inside of the windshield. I remembered Rule 6. If you encounter fog that appears suddenly and feels unnaturally cold, do not drive through it. Wait until it clears on its own. I stopped the truck about 20 feet from the fog and put it in park. The cold was unbearable. I turned the heater to maximum, but it did nothing. The frost spread across the glass, and I could see my hands shaking not from fear, but from the unnatural chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I waited. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. The fog did not move. It hung there, utterly still, as if it were alive and watching me. Then, through the thick white haze, I saw a shape. It was tall and thin, standing motionless just inside the fog. It did not move. It did not make a sound. It simply stood there, a dark silhouette against the pale mist. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to reverse, to flee, but I forced myself to stay calm. The rules said to wait. So I waited. The shape remained for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, it turned and walked deeper into the fog, disappearing completely. Moments later, the fog began to dissipate. It did not blow away or fade gradually. It simply vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. The temperature returned to normal, the frost on the windshield melted away, and the road ahead was clear. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my entire body trembling. I did not report this one to base. I did not know what to say. Wednesday night, I found the belongings. I was checking one of the smaller fire trails, a narrow dirt path that wound through dense underbrush, when my headlights illuminated something lying in the middle of the road. It was a backpack. I stopped the truck and stared at it. The backpack was old, faded green with brown leather straps, and it looked like it had been sitting there for years. But I had driven this exact trail 2 nights ago, and it had not been there. Rule 4. If you find personal belongings on the trail that were not there before, do not touch them. I drove around it, just like I had with the boot. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. I stopped the truck about 50 feet past the backpack, grabbed my flashlight, and got out. I know. I broke Rule 1. Never leave your vehicle after midnight unless absolutely necessary. But I needed to see what was in that backpack. I approached it slowly, shining my flashlight beam across the ground. The backpack sat upright, as if someone had carefully placed it there. I crouched down beside it but did not touch it. The flashlight beam illuminated a name tag sewn onto the front pocket. Matthias. My blood turned to ice. Gary Matthias, one of the Yuba County 5. The man who was never found. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. I ran back to the truck, jumped inside, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the radio. Base. This is Patrol 1. I need to report something. I found a backpack on the trail near marker 15. The name on it says Matthias. Silence. Base? Do you copy? Static. Then finally, Patrol 1. Do not touch the item. Mark the location and continue your patrol. We will send a team in the morning. But this could be evidence. This could be connected to. Continue your patrol, Nathan. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the radio, my mind spinning. They knew. They had to know. That backpack had been out here for over 40 years, and somehow it had just appeared in the middle of the road tonight. I marked the location on my map and drove away, but I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Thursday night, everything escalated. I was patrolling near the area where the Yuba County 5's car had been found back in 1978. The road was narrow, lined with snow that had started falling earlier in the week. My headlights reflected off the white ground, making it hard to see. At Coxcolmecumentam, I heard voices. They were faint at first, carried on the wind, but they grew louder as I drove. I slowed the truck and rolled down the window, listening. The voices were calling out. Not words, just sounds. Desperate, pleading sounds, like people lost and crying for help. I stopped the truck and grabbed the radio. Base, I am hearing voices near the old Forest Service road. Do we have any hikers reported missing? Negative. Patrol 1. There are no active search operations. Then what am I hearing? Silence. The voices grew louder. They sounded like men, multiple men shouting in confusion and fear. I could almost make out words now. Help us. We are lost. Please. Rule 6 came to mind, but this was not fog. This was something else. I checked the clipboard, my eyes scanning the rules frantically. Rule 6. If you encounter fog that appears suddenly and feels unnaturally cold, do not drive through it. Wait until it clears on its own. Wait. Rule 6 was about fog, but I was hearing voices. Rule 6 did not apply here. Then I remembered something Mrs. Calloway had said during my interview. The mountains remember everything. These were not real voices, they were echoes. Memories. The mountains were replaying the final moments of the Yuba County 5. I rolled up the window and drove forward slowly, the voices following me for nearly a mile before they finally faded away into silence. By Friday night, I was exhausted. I had barely slept all week, and every shadow in the forest seemed to hide something terrible. But I had one more shift before my weekend off, and I was determined to finish it. At 3 a.m., I was parked near an old logging site, filling out my logbook when I saw the headlights. They appeared in my rearview mirror, two beams cutting through the darkness, approaching fast. I sat up straight, surprised. I had not seen another vehicle on these roads in 3 weeks. The headlights grew closer, and I realized they were coming from an old car, something boxy and square, like a vehicle from the 1972nd. It pulled up beside me and stopped. I could not see the driver through the glare of the headlights, but the car just sat there, idling, its engine rumbling. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the truck, shining the beam toward the vehicle. It was a Pontiac, old, rusted, with faded blue paint. My heart stopped. I had seen this car before in the photographs from the Yuba County 5 case. This was their car, the one they had abandoned in 1978. The driver's side window rolled down slowly, and I shined my flashlight inside. The car was empty, no driver, no passengers, just an empty vehicle with the engine running. I took a step back, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The headlights suddenly shut off, and the engine died. The car sat there in the darkness, lifeless and cold. Then I heard it. Footsteps. They were coming from behind me, crunching through the snow. Slow, deliberate, matching my own pace. I froze. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps matching your own pace, stop moving immediately and count to 30. I stopped and began counting. 1, 2, 3. The footsteps continued behind me. 10, 15, 20. I could hear breathing now. Slow, raspy breathing right behind my neck. 25, 26, 27. Why 9? Why 9? The breathing stopped. 30. I turned around. There was nothing there. Just snow. Just trees. Just darkness. But the Pontiac was gone. I ran back to my truck, my heart hammering in my chest, and drove away as fast as the icy road would allow. I did not stop until I reached the ranger station. I filed my report, my hands shaking as I wrote. I described everything: the voices, the backpack, the fog, the Pontiac, the footsteps. I left nothing out. When I finished, I looked up at the clock. It was 5:47 a.m. My shift was almost over. I grabbed my coat and was about to leave when I noticed something on the desk. It was the manila folder, the one about the Yuba County 5, but it was open now, and there was a new document on top. It was a report, dated just 2 days ago, written by someone named Officer Daniels. The report described an incident similar to mine: hearing voices, seeing the Pontiac, finding belongings that should not exist. At the bottom of the report, there was a handwritten note. Officer Daniels did not report for his shift on Thursday night. Search teams were dispatched. No trace of him has been found. I dropped the folder, my hands trembling. Officer Daniels was the patrol officer before me, the one who had lasted 3 weeks, and now he was gone. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Friday. I had been working for exactly 3 weeks. I was next. I should have walked away. I should have left that ranger station, driven straight home, and never looked back. But something kept me rooted to that chair, staring at the report about Officer Daniels. 3 weeks. That was the pattern, and I had just completed my 3rd week. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening in these mountains before it happened to me. I spent the entire weekend researching. I drove to the county library in Marysville and searched through old newspaper archives, microfiche records, and historical documents about Yuba County. I found articles about the Yuba County Five, but I also found something else, something that made my blood run cold. The disappearances did not start in 1978. I found reports dating back to the 1952, loggers who vanished without a trace, hikers who were never found, Forest Service workers who walked into the woods and never came back. Every few years, someone disappeared in those mountains. Sometimes it was one person. Sometimes it was more. And there was a pattern. Most of the disappearances happened in the same area, a remote section of forest near Cascade Creek and the old logging roads where the Yuba County Five had vanished. The same place where my compass had gone haywire. I found one article from 1962 about a surveyor named Thomas Webb who had been mapping the area. He had written a letter to the local newspaper describing strange phenomena in the mountains, lights that moved through the trees, voices that called out in the darkness, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. 3 days after the letter was published, Thomas Webb disappeared. His body was found 6 months later, frozen in the snow, miles from where he should have been. The letter included a single line that haunted me. I believe the mountains are holding on to something that does not want to be forgotten. That phrase echoed in my mind. The mountains remember everything. That was what Mrs. Calloway had said. On Sunday night, I made a decision. I was going back to Cascade Creek. I was going to find out what was there, what was causing all of this, and I was going to end it. I knew it was reckless. I knew I was breaking every rule. But I could not spend the rest of my life wondering if I was going to be the next person to vanish. Monday night, I began my final patrol. I arrived at the ranger station early, at 7 p.m., and loaded my truck with everything I thought I might need: extra flashlights, batteries, flares, a satellite phone I had purchased over the weekend, and a digital camera. If something happened to me, I wanted there to be evidence. I wanted people to know the truth. I clipped the compass to the dashboard and reviewed the 7 rules one last time. Then I started driving toward Cascade Creek. The first hour was uneventful. I followed my usual route, checking trail markers and noting conditions in my logbook. The night was cold and clear, the stars bright overhead. Everything felt normal, but as I approached the turnoff to Cascade Creek, the temperature began to drop. My breath fogged in the cab, and I could feel the change in the air, a heaviness, a pressure, like the atmosphere itself was thickening. The compass needle started to twitch. I kept driving. As I rounded the curve where I had turned back before, the needle began spinning wildly. The headlights illuminated the narrow dirt road ahead, flanked by dense walls of pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint sound of running water. Cascade Creek. I stopped the truck and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Every instinct told me to turn back, but I had come this far. I needed to see what was at the end of this road. I put the truck in gear and drove forward. The road narrowed, the trees closing in on both sides. The compass spun faster now, the needle a blur of motion. My headlights caught movement between the trees, shadows darting back and forth, keeping pace with the truck. Then I saw the lights. They appeared between the trees on both sides of the road, pale and glowing, like lanterns floating in the darkness. There were dozens of them, moving slowly through the forest, converging on the road ahead. Rule 3. Do not look directly at any lights that appear between the trees after dark. I kept my eyes locked on the road, but the lights grew brighter, pressing closer. I could feel them now, a presence surrounding the truck, watching me, waiting for me to look. I did not look. The road curved sharply to the left, and suddenly I emerged into a clearing. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck skidded to a stop. In front of me was a scene that defied explanation. The clearing was large, circular, and covered in snow, but in the center stood 5 figures. They were standing perfectly still, facing away from me, their backs to the truck. They wore old clothing jackets and jeans from another era. They did not move. They did not make a sound. Rule 7. If you see 5 figures standing together in the distance, leave the area immediately and report your location. My hand shook as I reached for the gear shift. But before I could move, one of the figures turned its head. It was not a face. It was a blur, a distortion, like looking at someone through rippling water. The figure raised its arm and pointed directly at me. Then all 5 figures turned. They began walking toward the truck, their movement slow and deliberate. I could see their faces now, or rather, the absence of faces. They were hollow, empty, like shadows given form. I threw the truck into reverse and hit the gas. The tires spun in the snow, and the truck lurched backward. The figures kept coming, moving faster now, gliding across the snow without leaving footprints. I spun the wheel, turning the truck around, and floored the accelerator. The engine roared, and the truck shot forward, back the way I had come. The lights in the trees followed me, darting between the trunks, keeping pace. I could hear voices now, the same desperate, pleading voices I had heard before, but this time they were louder, more insistent. "Stay with us. Do not leave. You belong here." I gripped the steering wheel and focused on the road. The compass was still spinning wildly, the needle a frantic blur. Then, ahead of me, the fog appeared. It rose from nowhere, thick and impenetrable, stretching across the entire road. The temperature inside the cab dropped instantly, and frost spread across the windshield. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck skidded to a stop just feet from the fog. Rule 6. If you encounter fog that appears suddenly and feels unnaturally cold, do not drive through it. Wait until it clears on its own. But I could not wait. The 5 figures were behind me, closing in. The lights were all around me. I had to move. I made a decision. I grabbed the satellite phone and dialed 911. The line crackled, and a dispatcher answered. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Nathan. I am a patrol officer in Yuba County. I am at Cascade Creek, and I am being pursued by something. I need immediate assistance. Sir, can you describe what is pursuing you? I do not know what they are. They are not human. Please, send help. Send everyone. Sir, stay calm. We are dispatching units to your location. Can you stay on the line? I will try. I looked in the rearview mirror. The 5 figures were standing just behind the truck now, motionless, watching. The fog ahead began to swirl, and through it, I saw the shape again, the tall, thin silhouette I had seen before. It stepped forward, emerging from the fog. It was not a person, it was something else. Something old. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid. It reached toward the truck, its hand, if it could be called a hand, pressing against the rear window. The glass cracked. I did not think. I just acted. I grabbed the flare gun from the passenger seat, rolled down the window, and fired directly at the fog. The flare streaked through the air and exploded in a burst of red light. The fog recoiled, shrinking back as if burned. The tall figure let out a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the air and retreated into the trees. The 5 figures stopped advancing. The lights in the forest flickered and dimmed. And then, slowly, everything began to fade. The fog dissipated. The figures dissolved into shadows. The lights vanished. The temperature returned to normal, and the compass needle stopped spinning, settling calmly on north. I sat there, breathing hard, my hands still gripping the flare gun. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the satellite phone. Sir, are you still there? Yes, I am here. Units are en route. Can you describe your current situation? It is gone. Whatever it was, it is gone. Please remain in your vehicle. Help is on the way. 20 minutes later, 3 sheriff's vehicles and a county supervisor truck arrived at the clearing. Mrs. Calloway stepped out, her face grim. She walked over to my truck and knocked on the window. I rolled it down. Are you hurt? She asked. No, but I saw them. I saw the 5 figures. I saw everything. She nodded slowly. You broke the rules, Nathan. I know. But I needed to understand. She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Get out of the truck. We need to talk. We stood in the clearing while the deputies searched the area with floodlights. Mrs. Calloway explained everything. The mountains were not haunted in the traditional sense. They were a place where time folded in on itself, where traumatic events left permanent scars on reality. The Yuba County 5 had not simply died, they had been absorbed into the fabric of the mountains. Their final moments were playing endlessly, drawing others into the same fate. The rules were designed to keep people safe, to prevent them from being pulled into that loop. But some people, like Officer Daniels, ignored the rules. They tried to investigate, they tried to help, and they became part of the mountains. You were lucky, Mrs. Calloway said. The flare disrupted the phenomenon. Light and heat can sometimes break the cycle. But you cannot come back here, Nathan. You have seen too much. If you return, the mountains will recognize you, and they will not let you leave. I understood. I resigned that night. I packed up my things, said goodbye to the ranger station, and left Yuba County for good. But before I left, I did one more thing. I filed a full report with the county, detailing everything I had experienced. I included the history of the disappearances, the rules, and my theory about what was happening in those mountains. I demanded that the area near Cascade Creek be closed permanently. To my surprise, they listened. 2 months later, the county announced that a section of the forest near Cascade Creek would be permanently closed to the public due to hazardous terrain and unexplained environmental anomalies. Signs were posted, fences were erected, and the patrol routes were changed to avoid the area entirely. I moved to Oregon and took a job as a park ranger in a much quieter, much safer forest. I have not been back to Yuba County since, but sometimes, late at night, I think about those mountains. I think about the 5 men who vanished in 1978, their final moments echoing through time. I think about Officer Daniels, who is still out there somewhere, lost in the loop. And I think about the rules. If you ever find yourself driving through remote mountains late at night, and you see a set of rules posted in your vehicle, do not ignore them. Do not dismiss them as superstition or paranoia. Follow them, because some places do not forget. Some places hold on to their tragedies, replaying them over and over, waiting for someone new to join the cycle. The mountains of Yuba County are one of those places, and if you are not careful, they will remember you too. Author's note: this story is based on the real unsolved case of the Yuba County Five, who disappeared in February 1978 under mysterious circumstances. While the supernatural elements are fictional, the case itself remains one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. The men Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Ted Wire deserve to be remembered, and their families deserve answers. If you have experienced anything similar in remote wilderness areas, or if you know of any other unexplained disappearances in the mountains, please share your story in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and always follow the rules. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this story if it gave you chills. Until next time, stay vigilant.